Hi, welcome to the Gastroenteritis Blues. My name is Steve Lippman, joined as always by Dan Volpone. And this week, as the draft is upon us, we have a very special guest, friend of the podcast many times over and us of his, Porter, AKA TrillBroDude. Porter, thank you for being here with us. How are you feeling? We were just talking. It is slop season, so
That's
we sent out the bat signal. Thank you for being here. It's great to see you, buddy. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me back on.
Yeah.
I am very excited. This is 100% my wheelhouse. I mean, this year is the first year that I've gotten crazy into the draft, probably since the process era. I think 2018 was probably the last draft that I was like crazy into, but now I'm into it. We only have the 23rd pick, but I know a lot about the prospects. And then of course the free agency and trade stuff is my wheelhouse. So I'm really excited for this next 2 weeks.
Us too. Before we get into that, we're going to hit a few topics from just regular Sixers stuff. And before we get into that, any comments on the Warriors closed out the Celtics and Al Horford and Al Horford's many siblings the other day, which is great. Great news all around. Just thrilled that it happened. Would love another roundtable with all the siblings because I can't get enough of it.
Maybe the Celtics will never, they'll never win a game again. They went 0-3 after that fuck Philly article came out. So
after that bizarre, let's get all the siblings in one athletic article. Why the fuck are we doing this? He's like an average, pretty good role player on the Celtic. Let's interview all his family members. What are we doing? They all have Twitter accounts. Who gives a fuck? Wonderful.
Very strange.
Any thoughts on the Warriors closing out the Celtics?
Thank God, right? Oh my God. I will say, I felt like after everyone was comparing it, and I'm already bringing up the Sixers Raptors series, which is not a good sign, but everyone was kind of comparing it in game 4 when the Celtics had a chance to pull away and go up 3-1. And then Steph literally just went into God mode. It was very similar to how Kawhi did that in game 4 in the Sixers Raptors series. And when that happened, I was like, the Warriors got this. Like the Celtics had to win game 4. And then every game after that, it was just like they kind of figured them out from that point on. And look, man, like I love to shit on the Celtics. I love to shit on Boston, but like I think there's going to be major overreactions in the media to this when like one team had Steph Curry and the other didn't. Yeah. Like that's kind of what it comes down to. Like he's a top 10 player of all time. He already was before last night. That solidifies it. Like I wouldn't really read too much into it other than like Steph is a basketball god.
Well, and even I feel like we're already seeing overreactions with all the talk about how Boston doesn't have like a true point guard, like Marcus Smart's playing point guard, and that's why they're turning the ball over. It's like as if you plug Rajon Rondo into that team, they're like so much better in the turnover, right? Cut in half. It doesn't make sense. Like, well, other players touch the ball the whole possession.
Who's the Warriors' traditional point guard? Steph Curry, because he's not a traditional point guard at all.
They had their issue was that they had too many turnovers because they had too many turnover prone players. That was like the big flaw with their roster. It wasn't they didn't have like one particular type of player who's going to have the ball like maybe like 10% of the time on offense and not really do much. That wasn't their problem. It was very bizarre.
And Tatum played way below his average. He ran out of gas in this one, and Wiggins played great on him, and he just unfortunately sucks overall, which is a shame.
We won the draft night trade. That also is solidified.
They would win with Fultz.
All right. All I'm saying is, if we don't make that trade, we don't get Maxey because we traded Fultz for the pick that became Maxey. So like Tyrese Maxey, Jason Tatum, it's hard to say who you would prefer.
Right.
A lot of my favorite commercials say "Fortune favors the brave," and that's just something that I love saying. And it's just one of my favorite phrases.
Can I say something real quick though before we move off of this series?
Please.
Because I've been complaining a lot about all of the stuff Nate Silver does and all of those ridiculous catch-all metrics.
Calculator boy.
Yeah. So all of, and we talked about a lot with Mike O'Connor, especially like with some MVP related discussion. But I just want to talk for a second about the big win of the year for these advanced metrics, which is the Boston Celtics. And I just want to point out like how these advanced metrics really don't know their like limits. Like they go so above and beyond on certain players, and I'm not going to like get into how they suck in all the other ways, because we've done that on other podcasts and you can listen to those. But ESPN's Basketball Power Index gave the Celtics an 86% chance to win the series going in, and 538's Raptor gave the Celtics an 80% chance to win the series going in. So all the talk of, well, all of the, if you know, one of these metrics says that Jokic is you know, having the best season ever, well, that's one thing, but they all say it, so it must be true. It's like, okay, well, they all said that the Celtics were going to kill the Warriors. Like, that should, like, over 80% chance to win, that should be Celtics in 5, right?
Yeah.
And the Celtics clearly look like the worst team. The betting markets, which until the straw poll came out at the end of the season, had Joel as the MVP, had the Warriors winning this series, and had it being a much closer series. And I'm not trying to rehash the MVP discussion. I'm just trying to say that these catch-all metrics are so silly. Teams don't use them. They're like fun sometimes. I use them. Like, I'll look at like Raptor because I think it's fun sometimes just to like see what it spits out. But to like decide like who's better between two players by looking at that, or to, you know, use it to say that a player on a 6 seed is having the best season ever, is so unreal. And the Celtics were never an 86% chance to win the series. They should have been, and clearly were, as it played out, slight underdogs. It's what the betting market had, is what I thought going in. And
right.
I think we need to just take a step back and be like, this is insane. Let's just like acknowledge the limits. And there's like huge limits on these. There's like, their best use is like, this is kind of fun. And to use them for anything past that is nuts.
It's the classic overthinking that's constantly done by the basketball media, which is like, I mean, perfect example is like even earlier in the playoffs when all those guys that, you know, that have podcasts and they write for whatever publication, like they all were picking like the Raptors to beat the Sixers. And then after like 2 games, when the team was still healthy and like, you know, in one piece, it was pretty obvious that like the team that had 2 of, I don't know, the 175 best players of all time was going to beat the team that was led by Pascal Siakam. So like, it does feel like we read too much into these things. Like the Celtics became the analytics favorite team. They became the blog boy favorite team. No offense. I know we're on a Liberty Ballers podcast, but they became like the nerd favorite team. And all of it was just a massive overthinking when you consider, oh, right, like human emotion and experience matters. Like, yeah. Steph Curry and Draymond Green and, you know, Klay Thompson, who didn't even have a great series, have all been there before. And the Celtics, as much success as they have never been there. And it showed when you said, like, you're, you know, like there are things that you can't really quantify with numbers. And there are certain things going into that series that the Warriors had an advantage going into because they would figure it out over the course of a series, whereas the Celtics just didn't really feel like the seasoned veteran team. So leave it at that. Elsewhere,
Jake Fischer, friend of the podcast. I am surprised he didn't come directly to us to break this. Weird move.
That's what he did last summer. I have to say,
it is like, what he did last summer.
First to the Sixers that are not talking to Ben. Story.
Not talking to Ben, and then people were like, "That's not real" because he did it on that dumb shit podcast. And we were like, "That is fair."
They did say that. Then
we were justified. Then we were vindicated.
Mackenzie's Matisse Thybulle and all of those other weirdos.
They were like, "It's called the Gastroenteritis Blues."
I know.
Okay,
and we were like, right. "That's weird and shitty." We know that, but
like, literally,
the website that does the 25 best player list that suck. He's from Bleacher Report. He doesn't know anything.
Right. Yeah. Well, you know what? Egg on their face. Anyway, Jake.
I just want to say shout out to Jake, by the way. I know that he might be in witness protection right now because of Toronto Raptors fans. He had a report that OG Anunoby might be traded and there was a vicious assault. So protect Jake and just, you know, thoughts and prayers are with
also
Jake.
That numerous Raptors players are unhappy with their roles is also in there, which is so funny. Is karma.
He's brave. He's
Nick
such
Nurse
a brave soul.
And his branded hats are going to go right after Jake's neck. All right. Jake, who does a great job. He had a report that 2 weeks from the beginning of NBA free agency, all signs point to all-star guard James Harden returning to the Sixers on a shorter-term contract extension. The Sixers have been resistant to the idea of giving Harden a full 4-year max extension. Interesting. In any scenario, Harden is expected to pick up the player option for 22-23. Jake, I think theorizes, but sort of like informed theorizing, that a 2 or 3 year extension tacked onto that would make sense. And he also peppers in that Harden has said as much on record that he would be receptive to the idea of potentially taking less money to help the team in the future, but that's sort of to be determined. What he knows is that it seems like Harden will be back, shorter term extension, but that he will be opting in to that number, which I believe is 47 million. So it's a little bit interesting to me that he's going to opt into that number, which is super high, but doing the extension at a shorter term. I'm happy that the years will be less, and I'm hopeful that it won't be a full sort of long. It's obviously not going to be the full max, which I would be shocked if it was the full max. I guess I'm slightly disappointed that he's just picking up the option, because I'd like them to have more options, and I think Porto, you'll know about how that affects like their mid-level exception and stuff. So what's your immediate reaction when you see this news?
So yeah, I mean, my first immediate reaction was, oh no, my podcast content is ruined, because on my podcast, I've been talking about the MLE and the BAE and some targets we could go after with that $10 million, that $4 million that we could potentially bring in this offseason. And if Harden opts in, it almost throws that out the window, because the hope was he would get closer down to like a high 30s, low 40s. And Brian Toporek, who does great work on this, and Derek Bodner does too, but they basically explained to me that like they would have had to get under that like around $42 million mark in order to basically have access to those without dumping a bunch of other salary. So getting rid of like Furkan Korkmaz and Danny Green and getting back no salary, which is very, very unlikely.
Yeah.
So
they can decline Green's option though.
Sure. Oh yeah, sorry. They could decline Green's option. They would have to move Korkmaz and get no money back. But the hope was that you could move Danny with the pick and then get some sort of contributor back. So if you decide to do that, then basically you weren't probably going to have access to that anyway. So it might be a better way of acquiring that fifth starter if they can't move on from Tobias. And long story short, it sucks for that element of it, but it is good for the fact that like, if we were really handcuffed to James Harden and we didn't really know what he was going to look like for 5 years, that would be terrible, obviously. Like, I mean, like, it's one thing to have 33-year-old James Harden. It's another thing to see like, what's this guy going to look like at 37 years old at the end of this deal? So the deal ends around when he's like 36, I believe. And that's a little bit more palatable. And also, who knows what happens? My whole thing with this situation has been like, I think the window's now, and I think you got to kind of push in the chips. I think you need to do whatever you need to do, whether that is keep the pick and use it, or try to get a fifth starter with Danny's contract or with Furkan, whatever it is. Then I do think that like our options are much more limited for this offseason, which definitely sucks. But on top of that, I do think that like 2 to 3 years from now, like maybe Harden resigns for less money. Maybe things are going well. Maybe we've made a finals appearance, or who knows? If we won a title, who even cares about all of this?
Of course.
But maybe we've gotten a little bit deeper, and Harden can take a discount in a few years. There is going to be a cap spike in a few years with the new TV deal coming in, and they could potentially, even if Harden is not Harden and in 2 years from now he walks, there is an opportunity when Joel Embiid still is like in his early 30s to get one last push to create cap space, have Maxey, Embiid, and then a third star that could come in via free agency or whatever. So long term, it gives you a lot more flexibility. Short term, a lot less flexibility. But overall, not as bad as it could be, and I'm fine with it. Like, the way that the Sixers are going to contend is if James Harden is James Harden. Like, I think that getting in guys and creating depth is also important, but you can kind of figure that out on the margins a little bit easier. And Morey has a history of doing that. He hasn't with the Sixers as much, but he did with the Rockets. And the hope is that if Harden, is Harden again, and then Maxey can take another step, and Embiid's always getting better, then that's where we're going to contend anyway. So ultimately sucks, but it isn't the end of the world.
I also I wonder, looking at, I hate to like bring up like, this is almost just like the sad reality of it, but like you check the Josh Harris perspective of this and like what you're willing to spend. And I think that, the idea of trying to go after, a third star, fourth if you count Maxi, whatever, this summer, if one were to come available, like if you luck into Beal or Mitchell or Levine wanting to somehow come here, and you can, get off Tobias, do we have to do to figure that out? If Harden is obviously opting in this year, you're way into the tax, but if he's then the next year going to be making like 12 or 14 million dollars less than he is this year, you're looking at the opportunity to dodge the repeater tax. And I think that that's probably something ownership values. If they can like know that getting a third star doesn't necessarily tie them into a future of, paying, what is it, like 50, $60 million in tax money every year. And so I think that if they do get a Harden extension in the, low to mid 30s, that probably does open a bit of a door and give Daryl a bit of a green light to like be maybe a little reckless and like, do what you have to do to get off of Tobias and go get one of those guys, because that you probably could, especially because if Harden opts in, as it seems, the Sixers are, probably, they're like you said, they're not getting these exceptions anyway. So they were probably looking at a sign and trade. They're not going to create cap space, even if they get off of Tobias. They're not going to sign him into space. If it's a sign and trade for guys like Beal, for, Levine, not for Mitchell, then you're looking at being, hard capped anyway. So what's the difference? And if this is a 1 year thing where you're going to be hard capped anyway, then, that Harden extension, if you can be sure to have, these core four here and be under the tax at least until the Maxi extension, which you'll have 1 more year, I'm sure that probably looks pretty good.
Jake also goes on to say some of what we've heard, which is that Sixers are essentially trying to trade Danny. They're open to trading Danny with the 23rd pick, open to trading Thibault in some packages, but they're being a bit precious with him. They wouldn't trade him last year in the Ben deal. Great, worked out. Aces, excellent move. Tobias Harris, he will be mentioned in trade scenarios. He has received rave reviews. These are Zagat reviews, I guess, from staffers for his team first mentality and locker room presence. I remind you, this is a locker room which did not give a fuck in Game 6 of the playoffs. They just didn't try hard enough. Great.
He also, Tobias himself admitted this right after.
Yeah, no, Tobias went, it would have been nice if we tried harder.
Well, great. Yeah, because he's a locker room guy. That's great. He's leading the locker room, and he doesn't give a fuck.
He was so in tune with the locker room that he knew how little they cared. So he was the right one to tell.
He goes, that was tonight? Fuck. I knew that was, my alert didn't go off. All right. Well, he is a nice guy. All right. So should Harris remain in Philadelphia? This is Jake. There's an argument to be made that the soon-to-be 30-year-old would be greatly positioned to perform in a, well, what the fuck is this stanza? But Harris's representation,
his dad,
has made it known.
Just say his dad.
His father, right, has made it known that the veteran would like more on-ball opportunities within the Sixers offense, particularly in pick-and-roll action. What are we doing? Get him off the team. I'm sorry. Get him off the team. Listen, Tobias is generally a nice guy. He's a good statesman. He is nice in the community. He likes cookies. I'm sorry. He needs to go. Like, he's a generally decent player. He gets paid a shitload of money. It would be better if
you have to keep in mind that the value of all of his apes just went to shit. So he is probably not making as much as you think.
And like we've all fallen on hard times the pandemic. Like, this is insane. Like, his role, since Maxey has ascended the way that he has, and since we got James Harden and Joel's an MVP, like, his role is what it is. Like, sometimes he'll be able to solo on games that Joel is out, or games when Harden wants to like have a smoke break. I don't know. Like, sometimes he'll be able to solo and run more pick and roll, but like, it is like corrosive if your fourth best player who's already overplayed is bitching in the offseason in June about his role. It's ridiculous. It's obscene that he's going to the team complaining about his touches already right now. Like, I think he doesn't want to be here, honestly. Like, there was Keith Pompey reports, he had 2 of them recently, about how the Sixers have screwed over their 3rd best players lately. It's like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, I think that he would rather play on a worse team where he could get more touches, which is, God bless, go ahead. But like, I think they need to get him off the team. If he's going to be doing this and they're not even playing games, like, I really think they need to, if he's going to be doing this, they need to get him off the team. And I did not anticipate this kind of thing from him, because he was way better at the end of the year in that role. And now he's unhappy with that role. So he's really kind of good for nothing on the basketball court.
And the crazy thing is, he's talked for so long about how the fans hating him has like gotten to him, it's bothered him. It's like, okay, fine. And like, he was getting like standing ovations in the playoffs. Like, on a team that was like getting booed for poor effort, he was like one of the few guys who fans were appreciating, and like being like vocal about it. Like, people appreciated his play. They appreciated that, like, the playoffs, he finally accepted his role. And I don't understand where this is coming from now, because he had even talked about how, he really appreciated, hearing from like cheers from the fans, and like that, he had tweeted about it, like, and it was like a back and forth with Lauren Rosen on Twitter at one point about how like that meant a lot to him. And like, what is happening now? I don't get it.
It's just silly, man.
Yeah.
Or any thoughts on this?
I mean, look, we all have had the same Tobias conversation for what feels like 3 years now. He's not as good as his contract. He's a fine player or whatever. He is ideally, I started calling him, when he kind of transitioned into that role of spot up threes, attack closeout, save your energy for defense, hustle for rebounds, that kind of role that we always wanted Tobias in. I called him Tobias Harris and Barnes, which is like, we want him to be the role player guy that, when he was on the Warriors and he was the fourth guy, and, he knew his role. We wanted Tobias to be that. He finally became that. And now he's coming out completely saying the opposite. Part of me goes, even if he didn't get his way, I don't think Tobias would make a big stink about it. That's kind of just not really who he is as a person. But with the vibes being as sensitive as they are, with Joel Embiid, James Harden, who both have a history. I mean, Harden way more so than Embiid, but Embiid has a little bit of, he's not the most consistent. He's kind of all over the place emotionally sometimes. And you got to look at it like it's a sensitive situation where Tobias was a locker room leader before, and a guy that everyone seemed to like and be kind of like this connecting piece. If he is now unhappy, it's going to create a general unhappiness, which is what you're kind of talking about right now. But I do think that I thought about it more, and I'm like, it's a long season, and like giving Tobias Harris, like, I honestly would go to him and be like, look, if we're stuck with Tobias, I would be like, look, we're just going to load manage Harden and Embiid throughout the year. We're going to give them off 15 games a year. We're going to, if not more, if they get injured throughout the season, you and Maxey can be the guys during those games. Like, that's your role. Like, you can fill in that role when they're out, but when you're playing with them, this team's only going to go as far as those 3 take us, with Harden, Maxey, and Embiid. And running the offense around them is the best way to translate to the playoffs. Because like Tobias is actually a pretty good pick and roll ball handler in the regular season by the numbers. He's actually, it's very low volume, but he's been one of the better pick and roll ball handlers in the NBA statistically for the past 4 or 5 seasons. But this is in February against the Orlando Magic. Like, this is not going to work against the best defenses in the playoffs. And it's something that you maybe could fall back on, but like, it can't be a constant source of offense. So like, ultimately what it comes down to for me is just like, look, like, know your role. If you're here, you're here. I would prefer to move on from him just because I think it would give the team a little bit more flexibility. But I also think that it's a hard situation because like, just look around the league, dude. Like, no one's taking Tobias Harris for free. And then you have to attach legitimate like players and picks that you want and that you could improve the team with right now. We're already down 1 starter with Danny Green gone. So like, then we're down 2 starters, and then we have no real reliable bench players except for maybe Paul Reed. So like, it's such a tough situation. Like, that contract is just such a killer, and it makes everything so difficult.
thing with Tobias, and he has, I thought he played good defense in the playoffs, and I don't mean this as a knock on him, but because I think that he could be more useful elsewhere, to be honest, not just in a bigger offensive role, but just in a team that has different defensive needs around their star players. Like you have Maxey and Harden at the guard spots. You need a better athlete on the wings. And I think that it was such a good example. You watched this whole Celtics Warriors series, and Andrew Wiggins' job on defense was to be on mostly Jaylen Brown, sometimes Jason Tatum, jump as high as you can when they shoot these step backs and put a hand in their face, which Tobias really can't do. And, jump as high as you can and try to grab rebounds. And he did that well. And Tobias isn't that kind of athlete. Like as locked in as he was, and I thought he played the best defense he could play. He's not the kind of guy to do that. And if you look at the teams the Sixers have to go through in the East, right? Tobias's, best attribute on defense is that, like in that Raptors series, Tobias can take, Marc Gasol if he had to, and did a good job on him because he's sturdy and he's big. But like the guys you have to play defense on are Giannis, which no one can really guard him, but Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Jimmy Butler, right? George Niang, exactly. But like these are guys who are going to shoot mid-rangers over you, and you need someone who can get a high contest up, and that's not Tobias, and it's not really his fault. I liked how he played in the playoffs, but I would love to see the Sixers bring in a better athlete on the wing. That's all I wanted to say.
That's the problem, is everyone wants that guy. Like
of
that's
course.
But
no one wanted Wiggins a few years ago. Tobias has this awful contract. Well, the Warriors had this awful contract. They had D'Angelo Russell, and they got Wiggins in a first round pick. So I think I don't know who this player is, but there's creativity to
I've been looking,
figure something out. Yeah, I know you have. I haven't, because that would make me miserable, because this team makes me miserable. But I know you have.
It is I mean, Tobias, I think, scored like 40 points over the last 3 games or something like that. So it's not like he had some tremendous end to that series, the Heat series, but just the way he was playing was really encouraging to me, that he's fitting in around these guys, and I was encouraged by that. So for it to be June, 15th, and for him to already be leaking all this stuff to the media is discouraging in the way that because I was like, I want to trade him regardless, because I don't think that he's the right kind of 4 on this team. Like, I just think that we could, in an ideal world where we can repurpose his contract, and also I just like to shake up this core. I don't think that he's the right guy to have there, and also culturally, not that he's not a good presence in the locker room, but like I feel like there's something in this mixture you need to mix up. For him to already be complaining about his role is so like already like this thing that we were excited that he was willing to do, shoot quick and try hard on defense. He's already being like, no, I actually want more touches. And it's like, you're 4th in the pecking order at best, and it's like, that sucks.
It's funny to me because it's like, normally when players complain, and, sometimes they're legitimate complaints, they'll go to their agent. In this case, Tobias Harris's dad is his agent. So it's very funny to me just picturing just him going to his dad and being like, Dad, we need to sit down.
He's at somebody's birthday party and he says
it's literally
it's different. Yeah.
It's like when situation though. He's just telling his dad, like, I don't like this, but his dad is his agent instead of just like Adam Horford or whoever. And he's like, I gotta go tell Jake Fischer.
Yeah. And, it's like when my parents, when I didn't play for the middle school basketball team and they got mad at the coach, like it's the same situation, but he makes $180 million. So a little bit better situation.
We don't have to spend much time on this. Keith is a friend of ours. And Porter, you were on a joint pod with Keith here.
Yeah.
Keith put a real piece of art lately. This is an article about everything. I will say Keith has been on Harden picking up his option for a while now, which it sounds like he will. And that was included. He said Matisse Thybulle is coming up on being eligible for a maximum extension that he could sign. He said it's not likely.
True.
He said it's not likely, but he could. That's what he's eligible for, and he is, I guess, technically eligible for it. And I mean, listen, Daryl hasn't been great, but I don't think he's doing that.
He loves Matisse.
He said within the Matisse section, this offseason marks the first one in which Thybulle is able to focus on improving his offensive game. he was unable to do that during the pandemic lockdown following his rookie season. I don't know if you remember this, but during that period of time, Trump outlawed basketballs.
Yes.
That was one of his big ordinances. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we defeated fascism though. So.
Yeah, Trump wanted everything orange out, except for his hair. See, this is part of my act. Then he spent last summer with the Australian men's basketball team, winning a bronze medal in the Tokyo Olympics. So, I mean, the idea that Thibault was a 4-year college player and then is like a 3-year NBA player and has literally been disallowed from trying to improve on offense. And this is now he's allowed to. It's tremendous. Like he's finally allowed to. Great. But you could sign him to a max extension. Keith also wrote that the Sixers have a club option of $1.9 million on Shake Milton. There's a belief around the league that they won't pick it up. And then this guy, Michael Scotto, says the Sixers are expected to pick up the team option on Shake Milton. So, yeah, he kind of swooped in there. It just didn't make any sense that the Sixers wouldn't pick up the Milton extension because, I mean, Shake is inconsistent and he's hurt quite a bit, but he plays way above the value of a $1.9 million option. And if they don't like him, they can deal him for a second-round pick and recoup that value. I don't know if there's much else within this that we need, but that's all I had.
Going back to the Shake thing, I really think the Shake thing was a misprint by him because unless he just like logistically didn't understand how the trades work, because earlier in the article he says they're shopping Shake Milton,
right?
And then a few paragraphs later he says that they might then or they're going to decline the option. And so, well, you can't decline his option and then trade him. Like that's not, he'd be a free agent. So it's not really how it works, but yeah, I mean, Shake makes literally the least amount of money that you can make in the NBA for a veteran. So I think it's safe to say like a guy who can be like an occasional on nights where you want to rest your starters, he can be maybe, a 6-man type, a guy who's probably going to be like a 9th, 10th, 11th man on next year's team. Then he's fine. Like Shake, totally fine. Shake's fine. Just bring Shake back. I would personally like to move on from Matisse Thybulle. I don't, because of everything you talked about, which is just an absurd excuse to me. Because like it acts like no one else played in the Olympics. Like Jason Tatum wasn't in the Olympics last year, and now he was just in the finals. Well, he played poorly in the finals, so maybe Matisse actually has a point now that I think about it.
I just
get out of here with that.
I want to throw something out there from this piece, a little unrelated, but I think that there's like a pretty high chance that like Darryl really likes Matisse because they talk about politics and agree. I just have to throw that out there. I think that's a very good possibility.
It is possible. Well, here we are. We're going to go to an ad break and then we're going to talk about the NBA draft as the NBA draft is next week. Here's the ad break. We're back. All right, we're going to get into questions about the draft. Dan, go ahead and lead us off.
All right, just real quick, like, what is most likely with this pick here? Are we going to keep it, or trade it for a veteran, trade back? Probably not trade up, but like, what's going to happen?
I would say overall, there's probably a good chance they make the pick because it's going to be hard to find a team that's just like, yeah, we'll take on Danny Green, who's probably not going to pay next year $10 million just for the 23rd pick in the draft. The end of the first round, there's going to be a lot of teams looking to move out. Like the Mavs already moved out. OKC already moved out. The Warriors are going to try to. So the trade market, the thing we know about Daryl Morey is that he's going to wait until the absolute last second to possibly do it. So he already has to, he could come to an agreement right now and say, let's move the pick and then make the pick on draft night and then move it after. They technically can't trade it before then, but because we know that he waits until the last second and because we know that he will not make a deal if he feels as though he's not getting a good return back, I feel like odds are they probably make the pick. But I would probably say that's like 60-40. And if I were him, I would probably be trying to move slightly back in the draft, whether it's to the end of the first or the beginning of the second, and maybe get a future asset or get something, maybe a later pick in the mid-second or whatever, because to me, unless there's a guy like one of my guys that I really like on the board, I'm always fine with trading back as long because I trust the Sixers scouting department. Like I think that they do a good job at the end of the first and the beginning of the second. And when you're getting to that range, like the tier of player isn't that massive from 23 to like 34 or whatever. So it really just depends how the board shakes out, but I would lean towards keeping the pick for now. I go back and forth on this a lot, but like, I think it just makes the most sense unless there is a team that wants to like wave and stretch Danny over the next 3 years and pay him $3.3 million to not play the next year over the next 3 years, then I don't really see, or like an OKC where like, maybe you get like, I don't know, Jermichael Green, who they just got. And I wouldn't do that for the 23rd pick, but they have the 34th pick. So maybe you could figure something out there. I just think that like odds are they'll end up making the pick.
So the Sixers, they did this last year too, but they're either not working anyone out or they have a gag order with everyone to not say anything about working out with the Sixers. Which do you think it is? Do you think they're not working anyone out and they just look at highlights on YouTube? Or do they tell everyone to shut the fuck up when they leave the building? Like, what's the deal?
Yeah, I do think, well, they did work out a few prospects last year, but I think they were all smoke screens.
And not Jaden Springer. Right.
They didn't work out Jaden Springer, but to be fair, I feel like people forget that like the Springer thing was also the same thing that happened with Maxey. Like Springer was projected to go like 13th in the draft a week before the draft. And then he fell to us at 27. So like the idea that we would bring him in to scout him wasn't even in like our mind at all. Like I didn't even have him on my board until the day before the draft when I heard he was going to fall into the 20s. So they worked out like Austin Reeves and Jeremiah Robinson Earl. He was at Villanova, so he's probably like, yeah, just come over, whatever. Right. But this year, I would guess that they are just doing private workouts. A few teams do this around the league. The Pistons are famous for doing this under Troy Weaver. They don't really like to kind of like tip their hat on who they're interested in. I'm sure agents and players all know who they're working out, but they just kind of like to keep it under wraps. I would imagine that they're probably bringing in the few guys that they like in this range to see. But also Morey is going on the record as saying like, look, unless there's a Markelle Fultz situation, the large majority of workouts are not like really that useful anymore. Like sometimes you'll have a situation where you'll have a Bam Adebayo workout where he'll come in and he'll show you that he can do way more with the ball and he's much more offensively talented than he got to show in college. But the large majority of the time, it's like they're kind of worthless. So like, yeah, I wouldn't read too much into it. I think they're probably privately working guys out.
Before we get into like some of the guys who might be in this Sixers range, there's generally considered like a big four to this draft, like a top four players. I don't know. What do you think of these guys? Like, what order do you have them in? Obviously, they're not going to be Sixers, but like, what do you think?
I would go, my number one is Paolo Banchero. I believe that he has upside that people are seriously underselling. I think that he has potential to be a superstar in the NBA. He's 6'11" ball handler, power wing that is a good playmaker, has shooting potential. He's not a great defender, but like if you're worried about that, like, I mean, he can probably figure it out at his size. He's not the most athletic guy. But I just think that like, generally speaking, this is kind of a weaker draft at the top. Like last year's draft was super strong at the top. This year's draft, a little bit weaker. And so Paolo isn't like a perfect prospect by any means, but I think that he has potential to be the best. So I have Paolo 1, I have Chet Holmgren 2, who I think defensively is going to be a beast. I know a lot of people will make a big deal about his size, but I think that
is he Jewish? What do we think?
Chet Holmgren?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
It looks like he could be. I wouldn't draft him. I would stay away from him.
Is it
I love a Jew, but I don't want to draft him one over. Come on.
His last name is Swedish, I believe, Holmgren.
Oh, never mind. All right, maybe draft.
So yeah,
I love my people, but I don't want to, come on.
It's the comeback of the white American player. So we're seeing Tyler Hero started the
That's
Renaissance.
That's the clip. That right there is the clip.
Yeah. So Chet, definitely like the big thing everyone's going to make a deal about is like the size concerns, which is understandable. We've never seen a player like Chet before succeed in the NBA. So it is really weird, but like he's an absolute beast defensively. Like what Robert Williams does in the playoffs, he doesn't have the size of Robert Williams, but like he is going to have that kind of role, the roamer on the back line. That's going to be an insane help defender at the rim. He's going to be getting into passing lanes. Like he's legitimately going to be elite on that end, I think. And offensively, I don't know. He's probably more of a role player offensively. He might have more upside, and like I think he'll probably end up going number one just because he's so tantalizing with that upside. But yeah, so I have him 2, and then I have Jaden Ivey 3, who I think has at least a sliver of a shot at becoming a superstar. He's hyper athletic, really good shot creator. He's got a lot to work on with his game. He's a little bit him and Chet are a little bit older than Jabari and Paolo, which, you know, it's a year or two. It's not really that big of a difference, but usually these guys, when they come in to league, they're like 19 years old, and then you can build from that. Like Ivy's like, I believe he's going to be 21 as a rookie, but like, I just believe in the talent. It really jumps off the screen. He's gets compared to John Morant because they're friends and he's hyper athletic. He's not John Morant, but he's like De'Aaron Fox, Victor Oladipo, hyper athletic, like scoring guy. Like I think Ivy's going to be really, really good at the next level. And then my fourth guy is Jabari Smith, who I really like. Jabari Smith. I think that he might be being a little bit underrated by people because he's not a shot creator at all, because he doesn't have a handle. He can't dribble. Like he's basically just like, as someone described to me, like right now he's like Davis Bertans on offense, but with really good defense, which is like an incredibly useful player. And if he could get better and work on those things and, you know, kind of become more of an on-ball guy over the years, which generally speaking, you're already that. Like he got Kevin Durant comparisons, and that's insane. Kevin Durant was an extremely good ball handler and creator coming into the NBA. He's not going to be that, but like he could be all-star level player just based on how good he is at shooting and defending. So like he could be like a Klay Thompson type, but not quite as dynamic of a shooter. So those are my 4 in order. I like all 4 of the prospects though. Like I think they're all going to have like legitimately really good NBA careers. And I think that Paolo has the highest ceiling that I think he's actually going to hit. I think Chet has the highest floor of any of these guys. And I think that Jabari also has a super high floor. And then Ivy's kind of the wild card upside swing.
I will say about just like I don't watch Auburn basketball. Like I don't know. I haven't seen these guys. This is not Jabari specific, but I think that and it's something I used to believe, and I kind of don't anymore. But back when, you know, like Steph Curry really came on and all the bigs were learning to shoot threes. And it was like, wow, look at all these players who very quickly learned to shoot threes. Like it must be really easy. Like you could just learn to shoot. And meanwhile, like something like ball handling, like you can't really, like, if you don't have that coming in, you won't have it. But like we've seen, like Mikal Bridges really improved as a ball handler. He's not like, you know, a superstar, and he's not Kyrie Irving with the basketball, but he is like perfectly fine handling the ball in a way he wasn't when he came in.
Sure.
And we see plenty of guys who come in and can't shoot and don't learn to shoot because a lot of times it's just like a thing you have a knack for or don't. And a lot of these big guys probably had the knack for it and were just never told to shoot before. And so I think that, you know, it used to be, and maybe still is to a lot of people, just like, oh, you're not a good ball handler. That's always like, you never will be. This isn't like shooting where you can learn it. Whereas I don't necessarily think that's true. Like, I think that, you know, both of them are things that, like, if you are lucky, maybe your prospect will pick that up, but there's no guarantee they will, even if you put a lot of work in.
Yeah, it's definitely true, but also like that. So to put it like this, like, it's not just the fact that he doesn't have a great handle. He's not a great athlete. So like, if he's also not a great athlete on the fact that he doesn't have a great handle, like for example, Jaylen Brown, who his handle is still an issue for him. It's not like perfect, but he's become way, way better. He was horrible when he came into the NBA, but he's a guy who's got to the point where he's actually got to the point where he's at least a decent ball handler. And it's, once again, he has a loose handle. It's still a little bit of an issue, but he's such a good athlete that he can create these advantages just because he's so athletic and flexible and he can move so quickly. Jabari's not really that. And like, just generally speaking about that, like, shooting is the easiest thing to teach, but it's not necessarily like a given, as you said. Like the Sixers have learned this in a very hard way. Like we've gotten a bunch of guys who just cannot become shooters. They either don't have the touch, or they don't have the form, or they just can't figure it out over the years, basically. But generally speaking, yeah, that is like the case. But like, you know, there are also outlier exceptions where like Kawhi Leonard like became like an insanely good ball handler and creator over the course of his career. Once again, hyper athletic, but like was not that coming in. So like there are outliers when it comes to that, but generally speaking, like shooting is a skill that you can kind of build over the course of your career. And when you have a handle, it like I feel like there's more of a ceiling to that than there is if you don't.
So how we're gonna do this is we're gonna give you a different guy.
Hell yeah.
And have you sort of give us some sort of takes on you know how you feel about them as prospects and how you would feel about them at 23. But I figured actually, because I think my guy might be your number one for the Sixers at 23. Give me your favorite, like your ideal outcome if the Sixers stick at 23 and draft a player. Why don't we start there? Because I would think that he's on our list of guys here.
Yeah, I would imagine. My number one is Tari Eason from LSU.
So that's my guy. So go ahead.
Okay, cool. So Tari is a weird prospect because keep in mind, like I kind of play catch up during draft time. So like I first start with production. So I go and I look at the stats and I'm like, okay, so who is the most productive players? And like Chet Holmgren was extremely productive. Paolo Banchero was extremely productive. Okay, we're not going to get those. Who in the second tier of guys? And this was a guy in Tari Eason who was projected to go top 10, top 12 until recently. Very similar to the Springer and Maxey situation where they fell towards the back end because of whatever happened. The difference between Springer and Maxey and Tari is that Tari was extremely productive. He's also a little bit older. He's 21 years old. He's 6'8". He's a big power wing. He's going to play the 4 in the NBA probably. And he is a absolute beast on defense. Like he's kind of like, he takes a lot of risks. He does the Thibault thing, but like, imagine if Thibault was also even more athletic, but then on top of that was also 6'8", like 225. Like he's a big dude who you can put on the other team's best player, like a Giannis or a Tatum or whatever. And he's one of the best athletes in the class. He was crazy productive in college on the defensive end, especially, but offensively, he showed some flashes. There are concerns about his shot, which is why he's falling. There are concerns about his ability to create because he's just, once again, doesn't have a great handle. He is a very good athlete. He's a hyper competitor, which leads me to believe that he's just going to get better. And he showed touch from the free throw line. He shot 80% from the free throw line on extremely high volume because no one can guard this dude basically in college. He's just an overpowering freak. And because of that, he got to the line a ton and he shot 80%, which is generally speaking a better indicator of future success at becoming a shooter in the NBA than 3-point percentages. Sometimes guys shoot like Tyrese Maxey shoots 29%, but he's 84% from the line. And you're like, all right, we have something to work with here. The touch is there. He had much lower volume on floaters, whereas a guy like Maxey had a huge sample of shooting floaters and he was extremely good on those. So he's a little bit more like has lower like sample in that regard, but he was pretty decent. He shot like 45% on floaters. Like there might be potential there. His shot is like pretty much totally broken though. Like, so that is the thing that's going to scare the shit out of Sixers fans. And I totally understand if you're out on that. But my whole thing is like, these guys don't become available, especially at the end of the first round. And on top of that, you can't get him in a trade and you can't get him in free agency. Like everyone wants hyper athletic, big wings that can defend their ass off and do the things that we were talking about with Andrew Wiggins. Like we want that guy. And like, even if he never becomes that guy, my whole thing is like, so Jonathan Kuminga was a better prospect and like has generally speaking is like probably more skilled offensively and like will probably have a higher upside than Tari. He didn't have quite the production that Tari had, but he has definitely some higher upside. Jonathan Kuminga would probably go for a lot in the trade right now, and he's not even a good NBA player right now. Like, just based on like the few games that you saw him, because he's so talented and he's so big and he's that archetype that everyone's looking for. That like, I look at it like, if you get Tari Eason and he dominates in summer league, and then he comes into his rookie year and he's really good, like, if we can't fix his shot, some team's going to take the risk on that, and we can figure out later what we can do with that, really. So like, Tari's my guy. Like, I feel like he's the only thing that's going to hold him back is the offensive side. Like, if he can never develop a handle, a shot, and his decision making isn't great on that end either. But ideally, he's like a play finisher, where like hopefully he can get to the point where he can shoot spot up threes and attack closeouts and be like an OG Anunoby type. Basically, is the hope there.
All right. So, what are your thoughts on Jalen Williams?
So I like Jalen Williams. Only thing I'm worried about with Jalen Williams is that he played 3 years in college. He's 21 years old. So he's around the same age. I think he's 21, 22. He is around the same age as Tari, but the difference between those two is that he wasn't nearly as productive, like from like point standpoint, from a defensive standpoint. He just showed things that feel like they're going to translate to the next level. He's a guy that I've kind of come around on recently. I was informed by a guy named Chucking Darts. He has a great podcast called Chucking Darts. He came on my podcast and he talked me into him like 2 weeks ago. And now I'm like totally in on Jalen Williams. He's third on my board right now. Basically all you need to know about him is like, he really impressed at the combine. He came in and was like not projected to go as high as he's probably going to end up going. I don't even think he's going to be available for the Sixers anymore. Like, he was a second round pick not that long ago, and now he's probably going to end up going in the teens, which those guys always scare me a little bit because like they kind of come out of nowhere. Whereas Tari's like the opposite. Like, Tari's falling from the top 10 to the back end of the lottery because of some question marks. Jalen Williams is skyrocketing. So he went to Santa Clara, which is, obviously a smaller school, but they do play in a decent conference. They play against Gonzaga twice a year. And he showed, he's a great shooter. He's definitely going to be a guy you can plug and play as a wing pretty quickly. And the thing about him that everyone kind of was like, wow, we didn't realize this, is that he's like 6'6", 6'7", but he has a crazy wingspan. He got to the combine and he had like this 7'1" wingspan, I think it is. And then on top of that, he also basically, he gets in there and he's just dominating in the combine games. So when he starts dominating the combine games, everyone's like, all right, what we need to know more about him. And the more that people have dove into the tape and looked at the stats and everything, like, it feels like he's going to be at worst like a rotational wing in the NBA, which, as we know, is incredibly hard to find, especially a guy who can handle the ball a little bit. He's not going to run your offense, but he can be a secondary creator. He can shoot threes. He's a really good passer. So like, offense, he's more of an offensive guy that you hope, because of the tools, he can get there defensively. But yeah, Jalen Williams is going to be good. Like, these are the guys I feel like they have a very high floor of like, they're going to be NBA players. Whereas at the end of the first round, like, usually you're taking total risks of like, all right, is this guy even going to be a guy at all?
Yeah, I feel like maybe I'm a little biased, like, have a little recency bias here, but like, when I hear like an offensive guy, I hope you figured it out defensively. I'm like, well, Ben figured it out defensively. So, that was an offensive guy coming in. It's fine. Like,
same exact scenario.
It's the same thing. All right. So here's a guy who I've seen play exactly one game because I watched Villanova in the tournament. EJ Liddell.
Oh yeah.
What do you think?
I like EJ. He's also, so these are all my guys. Like, these are all dudes that I think are going to be good. I think EJ Liddell. So I have him fourth on my board now. I had him higher before. The only thing that I'm worried about with EJ Liddell is what position he's going to play. Like, if he's really a good enough rim protector at the NBA level and he can move his feet in well enough in space, which is, moving his feet well in space is not something that he's thrived at. If he can make strides, which he absolutely did, he came back this season. I had someone Maxwell Bombards on my podcast a few weeks ago, and he basically said, like, the thing about Liddell that everyone loves is like, he went to the combine last year and they said to him, look, work on your shot, work on your defense, defense, work on these things, come back next year and we'll see how you look. And he skyrocketed up boards. Like he could end up going in the teens too. He could end up going in the early 20s. He's a highly productive player. I think he's a pretty safe pick. Like I think at worst, EJ Liddell like is going to be like an 8th or 9th man, like a useful player you could bring in off the bench. And if he hits his ceiling, which might be a little bit higher than I think people are giving him credit for, because it feels like we do this with the older players a lot, where like, yeah, he's 22, but like he was really, really good at 22 years old in college. Like he was legitimately like productive as hell on a good team with Ohio State. He had one other NBA guy with Malachi Branham on the team. So like, you know, that obviously helps, but you know, he was doing a lot of things that might not necessarily translate to the NBA in terms of like, he posted up a lot and like, he had a lot of offense run through him. That's not what's going to happen. You want him to be like a PJ Tucker type. You want him to like shoot threes, keep the ball moving, which by the way, he's a pretty good passer and he's a pretty good shooter. If the shot has questions about it, but like, I trust that it's going to translate. I just think that like, from everything I've heard, and like, I actually know people that like have like trained with him and they're like, no, this guy is like a psycho worker. Like he's going to come in and he's going to bust his ass. And like shooting is one of those things we talked about earlier where like, you know, some guys have it, some guys don't. Well, he showed enough of it in college. And if he's a worker on top of that, then he's going to get to the point where I think he at worst has an average NBA jumper and he might be able to stay on the court because of all the other things like the rim protection and just kind of like his overall like IQ. He's a super smart player. I think he's probably the safest pick that we could take here in terms of like, he might have a little bit lower of a ceiling than like Tari Eason, but I think that he's going to have just like, I feel like I could see EJ Liddell having like a good like 10, 12-year career just as like a really, really good role player.
Yeah, you know, obviously you prefer a guy to be younger, but I feel like people get a little carried away when they're like, oh, well, his ceiling's capped because he's 22. And it's like, as we know, every NBA player is done improving at 22. Like if you're not where you are by 22, you're done. That's all you have. Like
we also have a recent history of that just not being true at all. Like I mean, like
yeah.
Desmond Bain was 22 when he came in. Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum, Jimmy Butler. Like there are guys. Like there are exceptions to
these guys are going to get better in like until they're like 30.
Sure.
Right? Like
Mikal Bridges, like the guy you talked about earlier, he was 21, 22 when he came in. Like, yeah.
Like, of course, I prefer if this same player with the same skill set was 19, but like, I don't think you can write a guy off because he's not. But
you gotta if you're going for the upside swings, I get taking the 19-year-old, but like it doesn't mean that the guy that's 21, 22 doesn't also have a lot of upside, just because the thing that people overrate the most, I think, is like that's raw and athletic, but they're not particularly good at basketball. And like EJ Liddell, Tari Eason, Jalen Williams, like they're really good basketball players that could get better just because generally speaking, NBA players do.
Right.
Unless you're a Sixers fan.
Our guys don't, but other players do. Just Maxey.
Yeah.
All right, here's two guys who I've seen a lot and whose names are like very similar. So I'm just going to give them to you both at the same time and you tell me what you think. Jaden Hardy and Dalen Terry.
So I love both of them. These are all my guys. So like Jaden Hardy, that is like the upside guy. Like that's like, I honestly, like I have him number 2 on my board, but I'm also like, if we went with one of the older guys, I wouldn't care that much because I don't know. It really depends. If you think Jaden Springer can play next year, which I'm skeptical of because I'm still worried about the shot, then I do think that like if Jaden Springer can play next year, Jaden Hardy is a totally fine pick there because you don't want to have too many spots on a contending team that are like safe for just developing guys. But if you have 1 or 2 at the end of the bench that like maybe a year or 2 from now could be contributors, that's totally fine. The thing I like about Jaden Hardy is he was already like, he struggled in the G League. So just a little bit of background on him. He was the number 2 recruit in the country a year ago, and he was expected to be a top 5 pick in the draft. He goes to the G League and he struggles massively in his first month or 2. And his shooting was terrible. Shot selection was really bad. He is a hooper. And I wanted a dog throughout this whole process. That's Dalen Terry, who we'll talk about in a little bit. But like Jaden Hardy is like the ball don't stop like king. Like he is a pure hooper. and he's going to have every knock that you hear about all these bucket getters, bad shot selection, gets tunnel vision, all that stuff. But he's also extremely talented as a shot creator. And if you are looking for an upside swing that you can develop alongside your other guys that might be taking a step further in that development, Jaden Hardy's a really good guy to take a swing on. We've been connected to him at 23. I don't know. There were 2 Intel-based mock drafts that had us taking, there were 3 actually. Kevin O'Connor's had us taking Blake Wesley, who's another guy that's like kind of an upside swing guy. And then the other 2, ESPN and Bleacher Report had us taking Jaden Hardy. And like, the thing about Jaden Hardy is he's the perfect kind of guy that you want to bring in. He's like a Cam Thomas type, where like, remember how like Cam Thomas is another guy who's like a pretty good basketball player. Like he coming into the draft, he was getting shit on for the same things that Jaden Hardy was getting shit on for. And I still don't think he's like a good NBA player right now. He was a rookie, and like he'll probably get to the point where he's like either a really good 6-man or like a solid starter that can work off of guys. And I do think that like guys like Cam Thomas and Jaden Hardy might lose a little bit of value just because you just look at them and you go, oh, they're scorers. If they're not stars, what can they be? And I'm like, well, there are plenty of guys, especially in the modern NBA.
Jordan
like
Clarkson comes off the bench and
Jordan
scores.
Tyler Hero, Jordan Poole, and yeah, maybe those guys eventually will get to the point where they're a little bit better and they can be seen as the stars. But like, if they don't, they're still fine, useful players on good teams. And my whole thing is like Jaden Hardy's the kind of guy, if you get him, very similar to Tari Eason, if he shines in the first year or two, like I think Cam Thomas, if you put him on the trade market right now, would have a lot more value than he did when he got drafted at 26 last year. And ultimately those are the kind of things that you're looking for when you're trying to rebuild kind of like our cupboard's going to be really bare now because we're using our last pick basically this year. We're not going to be able to trade except for super far out picks, which teams usually don't value. We really only have like 2 or 3 prospects in the pipeline. And the thing is like, if you bring in Hardy and he flashes in summer league and he shows in preseason, and he'll probably be in the G League again next year, because by the end of the season, he kind of figured it out in the G League and he was like much, much better. And I think this is like someone that could be like him and Tari are like the 2 guys I look at as like lottery talents that we could get at 23 that we've gotten lucky with. And the other guys are more like probably like mid-teens, late teens talents that I feel a little bit like safer about the fact that like, I know that they're probably going to be pretty good NBA players, but I don't think that they have quite the upside of Hardy and Eason.
How much do you worry about like, okay, so Jaden Hardy, like maybe a Cam Thomas type coming in where it's like, yeah, he's a hooper. Yeah, he also like right now kind of sucks for an NBA player, but you fully can see like if he makes strides in certain areas, he could be very useful. Like with and I don't mean to like make this Doc specific because a lot of coaches do this, but like with Doc, like on a team that wants to compete now, like is that guy really going to see like, I mean, Paul Reed didn't play till the very end of the season. Like a guy who has to work out the kinks, a guy who has to get a better feel for the NBA game. That's their big thing. Like, is, a coach going to give him a shot? And specifically here, is Doc going to give him that shot to work it out in the regular season?
Yeah. I mean, look, that's the reality that we live in. Like, that's kind of just the situation that we're in right now. Like every coach does it, but Doc is one of the more stubborn ones. Like to me, it's like Doc, Thibs. Like there's just like a handful of guys that are like, we're not playing young players ever, basically. And unless it's an extreme circumstance, like one of your best players decides to just quit playing basketball. And then you also have this other guy that's on the bench that you can bring in and replace him. But, I do.
It's just a hypothetical, by the way.
That never. Yeah, definitely. Just made that up off the top of my head. But, I do think that that's a concern for sure. And that's why I'd be fine with trading the pick. Like, I'm not opposed to trading. I think that I would prefer to make the pick just because of everything that I've stated. Like, I think the Sixers are going to have no flexibility. They're going to have nothing to trade. They're going to have nothing to really look forward to outside of just like Maxi's development. And like, that's like your upside swing. And getting more upside swings would certainly not help in terms of like having them on the team, because like a lot of people have talked about like drafting for fit, right? And I'm like, the Sixers have like 5 playable players in the playoffs, maybe 4.5, really. Paul Reed's not like fully there yet. Like we think he might be there. So like we really have 4 guys who are playable in the playoffs. We can't be super picky, but like if there's a good veteran out there that's the alternative, I'd be fine with that. But I think that like, I think that there's probably going to be a little bit more of an understanding, because as Dave Early brought up when he came on my podcast recently, it's like, look, when Morey and like when we got DeAndre and he wasn't working out, there was that Jake Fischer piece that came out that like, it seemed like there was a little bit of a disconnect between the front office and Doc, and that like there was some tension there because Doc just literally refused to play. He only plays his guys basically. And, you know, part of the job is like, Morey, don't give him those guys. And I hope he doesn't. But another part of that is like, maybe that's why Paul Reed ended up getting that opportunity at the end of the year. He played into the playoffs. And like, if you want a guy that Doc's going to play, don't draft Tari Eason, don't draft Jaden Hardy, because those are 2 guys he's not going to play because of the things that you mentioned. Tari's going to have a lot of bad decision-making early. He's going to have to learn on the job. EJ Liddell is a perfect kind of Doc guy. Like he's kind of like Tobias-y basically, but like
that's what I was thinking when you were describing him, but I didn't want to say it.
Yeah, no, he's a little Tobias-y, but Tobias if he had better role player skills, if that makes sense. Right. Like I could see EJ Liddell becoming a really good corner 3-point shooter, a willing corner 3-point shooter, a rim protector, like the things that you want Tobias to buy into and do. But he is a little bit, but like Jalen Williams probably would be a guy who could play right away. EJ Liddell, because like all the guys that we've drafted so far, there have been 2. Well, first off, they're all high pedigree guys. Springer, Maxey, Bassey, like they all were like former high recruits in high school, and then they end up like whatever. But long story short, the large majority of these guys that we've drafted are pretty young when we draft them. They're usually 19 or 20, sometimes 21. And Isaiah Joe's
the youngest player in the drafts.
Well, yeah, Springer was the second youngest player in the draft behind Josh Primo last year. So like, generally speaking, we've drafted guys who are super young and most of the time not ready when they're in their rookie year. If you draft a little bit older, I think that like Doc, like I'm fairly certain Doc would have no problem playing EJ Liddell next year. But I think that like, if you want a guarantee of that, you might be better off trading for a veteran. You know that he definitely will play.
Yeah. So we're taking up a lot of your time. We have like 4 other guys here. Dan Terry, who I already mentioned. Go ahead and give however much time you feel is appropriate to any of these guys, because I haven't seen any of them play. But we have Dalen Terry, Marjan Beauchamp, Blake Wesley, and actually Steve put Marjan. I shouldn't blame Steve because Steve does like all the prep work. But all right, so just those 3 because you have to guys twice.
Yeah, those are my other 3 guys. They're my second tier. So I actually have another guy that I want to add to this. I'll talk about him a little bit later. It's Ty Washington from Kentucky. But okay, so Dalen Terry is you want a dog, draft Dalen Terry. Like he's the dog of the end of this first round. Like he is a get in your grill, hustle, get rebounds, play defense. The only thing that scares me, and like look, like you know, Eason has question marks about the shot, Liddell has question marks about the shot. I'm not saying that they're going to be perfect, but I worry about Dalen Terry's offensive game a little bit. And a really smart draft guy said to me, like Ben Pfeiffer said to me like 2 weeks ago, he's like, he might be a little bit thigh ball. And like, that's something that would be concerning. Like defensively, he's going to be awesome. Offensively, he averaged 8 points a game as a sophomore. Like that's not a great sign. Like generally speaking, guys that average 8 points a game never end up becoming good NBA offensive players. Like, so the hope there really is that like Dalen Terry, who another guy who's a dog and a worker, and like one of the he's so confident. And the other day he said in a workout, like in 10 years from now, when we're doing redrafts of this draft, I'm going to go a lot higher. And like, that's the kind of attitude that like my whole thing with Thibault has been like, I think he has the talent to become like a legitimate, like Danny Green type player in his career. I just don't think that he particularly really puts in the work or cares all that much about basketball, which is totally fine. Like, I mean, like, I don't want him on the Sixers, but like, if that's your thing, like I'm not crazy about my job. I just work a job. Like it's my job. And my whole thing on this is like, if Dalen Terry is Thibault offensively, but he also wants to work on his game, and like he might get to the point where he's a decent spot up shooter, and he'll probably end up being, because he's pretty athletic and long, and he's skinny, he's 6'7". He'll probably play the 2 to start. If he can put on some weight, he'll probably end up being able to play the 3 at certain points. But he was like a point guard, shooting guard at Arizona. And so I'm a little bit worried about the offensive game, but the defense and the rebound and all the role player things we want from a guy are already there. So if the shot and the other stuff can kind of come into form, like he's going to be a good role player. And he's another guy who's been shooting up draft boards. He was projected to go like 50th until the tournament. And then he started rising. And now he's probably going to end up in our range around like 23. And I wouldn't be surprised if we drafted him. He seems like a guy that Morey would like. I'll say that much.
And then you said, so the other two were Marjan Beauchamp, Blake Wesley, and you had Ty Washington as well.
Sure.
So you don't have to say whatever you want, but you know.
Okay. So Marjan's another guy that like, I'm really worried that like, okay, so he's a little older. He's 21. He played in the G League. I do wonder what the G League guys, like, it seems like it takes a while to get used to the G League, because like by the end of the season, they all kind of figure it out. Like Beauchamp is pretty athletic. He's 6'6". He's a wing. You know, he's kind of in that mold of guy that you're just hoping that you can mold into something, which another prototype that just kind of scares me. You know, his shot looks good, but like he's just not a great shooter right now. And then like defensively, like he has all the tools, and like we'll probably get to the point where he's a really good defender, but he's not a really good defender right now. So like the hope with a guy like Beauchamp is that like you can kind of develop him, and I like him as a prospect for a team like the Spurs, probably more so than the Sixers, because like this, they'll teach him how to shoot, they'll teach him like everything that he needs to become a good NBA player, and a few years from now we'll be like, how did they get this guy at 26 or wherever they pick? But like the Sixers just don't really develop guys. That's why I'm kind of am leaning towards the more like finished product players, because, or at least like workers that like I know are going to be like maxi types that like in the offseason are going to develop themselves, because the Sixers just haven't invested that much in like developing their guys. Like I think Paul Reed and Maxey, like they've kind of developed themselves. Like they come back better after the offseason and they're better at certain things. And I don't really think that it's like the team that's necessarily working with them. So like Beauchamp is like a prospect I like and like has potential. And once again, like if you hit on a wing at the end of the first round, that's massive, because no one can get wings. They're the most desired thing in the NBA right now, and it seems virtually impossible to get any good athletic ones. So I think that's kind of the idea there. It's more positional value than anything else with that pick. Blake Wesley, I wish I knew more about Blake Wesley, to be honest. I just know a lot of really smart draft people that like him. But he's another guy that's just like super young, 19, has upside, scoring guy. He's not a great finisher right now. He can shoot, but like it would come and go. Like he's a lot more like, I would be pretty, like he got connected to us in a few mock drafts, and I'm like, I'd be pretty surprised if we drafted him, because he probably has a long way to go. But like of the guys later, he's another guy that has like a ton of upside if you want to take a swing. So I don't know a ton about him, but like Ty Washington is another guy that I haven't really gotten into until recently, but like watch Ty's film. Like the Kentucky thing is real, dude. Like you go to Kentucky, like you're not going to go there and you're not going to be like this hyper productive, win a ton of games, like whatever guy. Like Kentucky seems to now focus more on like developing their one and done guys than opposed to like actually like working like towards like being a winning product in college necessarily. So like the guys like, I mean, God, go back to even the really good Kentucky teams, to be fair, like Devin Booker and Tyler Hero, and then you get Maxey, and then like every year there's like a different, what's that?
Shai Gilgeous-Alexander,
Jamal Murray, like the long lineage of Kentucky guards that end up, because like the way that they develop guards and like the way that they have the eye for talent for these guards is really impressive. Like even a guy like Emmanuel Quickly, who's like probably going to be a pretty good role player. Like the large majority of these guys that actually end up getting drafted are pretty fucking good. And I do think that like Ty is just like Ty was projected to go way higher. He got injured and his stats fell off. He didn't look nearly as good. But like, I do think a large part of that was the injury. He's another guard. He's bigger than Maxey, a little bit bigger, but like he's like 6'4", and like he's not as bursty as Maxey, but he's got a crazy floater package. He shot 59% on floaters this year, which is fucking bonkers.
Yeah,
he shot 57% on long twos, which is fucking bonkers. Yeah, like
long two in college is like 20 feet, but that's still crazy.
Okay, so maybe it wasn't long twos actually. Now that I'm thinking about it, it was that 8 to 16 range. So like the pure mid range. But the reason why he was taking those shots,
really good, though.
It's extremely good to shoot 57% from that range. And the reason why that's important is because his spacing was really bad. Like Sam Vecini explained this on a recent podcast where he's basically like his spacing was really bad. So he had to take those mid-range shots and he was really good at them, which shows that like a lot of guys that are good mid-range shooters in college, like can almost always extend it out to the 3-point line, especially because like Ty was actually a pretty decent 3-point shooter. I think he shot like 36% on decent volume this year. And like what I think was creating most of those looks because their spacing just wasn't that great. And like, just generally speaking, like he's super talented. Someone called him to me like a diet Mike Conley. Like, I think he'll be like a role player type guard, but like a very useful one. Like he would be a great third guard for the Sixers. Defensively, he's going to be really good at like chasing guys around screens, and he's just like a really smart defensive player. So I do think that like Ty probably has some room to grow, but he's a little bit older of a prospect. He was a freshman one and done, but I think he's 20 almost. He'll be 21 at some point next year because that's how time works. But he is someone that I think could probably play within the next year or two if the Sixers do end up getting him. Once again, high pedigree guy too. He was a high recruit, was supposed to go high in the lottery and then fell because of the injury, but the talent is certainly there.
It's so interesting. And I feel like with Calipari, I'm always asking myself, like, is he just such a phenomenal developer of these guards, or is he just such a bad coach who has a great eye for talent? Like, well,
I think it's that.
You think it's that?
I think it's that. I think everyone like I think that he's lost a little bit of his magic as a coach. Like, I don't think that like he's kind of like college Doc almost, where like he trusts the older guys a lot more, but it forces the guys around them to develop their games, because the large majority of guys that are coming into college are like Devin Booker eventually got to the point where he was an on-ball guy, but like now he's a really good off-ball player, and Maxey's a really good off-ball player, and Hero's a really good off-ball player because of the things that they had to learn when they were at Kentucky. They weren't these ball-dominant guys, and that gets them ready for the NBA, where like 99% of the time when you go to the NBA, you're going to have no role player skills, because most guys come in and they're ball-dominant and they're just like, they're the guy. Yeah, exactly. So like they're Kentucky players tend to be a lot more malleable because Cal does that basically. So like, that's kind of just like the general way to explain it. But like, yeah, like he's got an amazing eye for talent for sure.
Yeah. So those are all of the, all of the guys that we wanted to ask about. So my last question for you, and it's maybe the most important one, although, the Sixers have, I think, drafted really well, since Daryl's been here. And even, for a while before that, I mean, the Sixers have had, with some like really, really blatant exceptions, like good drafts. Who would be to you a guy or a couple guys who you see getting, sometimes mocked to the Sixers going around that range, who you'd be like, well, that sucks. Like that was an awful pick.
So there's not a lot of guys that I would be like, that's an awful pick, but and they're not even bad prospects to me, but like, I would be really disappointed. I'm looking at boards right now, like our range. I would be really disappointed if we got like Nikola Jovic, who not Jokic, Jovic, who's, you know, a forward prospect who like he's probably going to be okay. I don't know. Like most of these guys in this range, like 50% of the time they're not NBA players. So like who knows? But like he's super young, has shooting and passing upside. He's not probably going to be a creator, and he's really bad on defense, and he doesn't really have the tools to like get better on defense. And like, I'm thinking, looking at these guys, other than Hardy, everyone that I mentioned at least is going to be passable defensively. And like, I think the Sixers, like you mentioned earlier, when you have Harden and Maxey, like having good defenders around those guys is going to be extremely important for the next few years. Like, I don't really want to draft a guy that has no defensive upside. So like, I definitely, they went and scouted Jovic. Also, Jovic is probably going to be a stash, which would be a really bad idea to draft him if he ends up going over and staying over there for 1 year. You know, another guy that like I've kind of soured on personally ever since I talked to more draft people that know even more than me. Like, I'm like, I get into the game late and I figure out this stuff. Another guy I would be pretty disappointed with is Patrick Baldwin Jr., who I honestly, Kendall Brown, who he's probably going to end up being good in like 4 or 5 years, and this will look like a bad take, but like he's another guy that like he just doesn't shoot, and like he's a wing, and like he'll develop on a good team and probably end up becoming okay. But like if for the Sixers, like he's like Beauchamp, where I'm like a little bit worried about like that guy on the team. But Patrick Baldwin Jr. is a different kind of prospect where like he was one of the worst players in college last year in terms of like production. Like,
yeah, I'm good then. That's
negative BPM as a freshman. And like he has a very weird situation. His dad is one of the I always joke about it. He bought a high school, he bought a charter school, and like did the Imani Bates thing where like basically it's a weird situation. And like his dad was the coach at Milwaukee, where he went, and it's a very weird situation. A lot of people like him because he has he showed a crazy shooting upside in high school. Like he was supposed to be a much higher pick and fell way further down than he was supposed to go because he was so bad his 1 year in college. But everyone that is like a defender of him is basically like he was asked to do way too much on a really bad team. He will find a role in the NBA, but then he got to the combine and he tested like horribly athletically, like one of the least athletic guys in this entire draft. And I'm like, the Sixers just cannot take another, like he's big and he can shoot theoretically, I guess, but like the Sixers can't take a guy who wasn't productive in college. And then on top of that, like isn't even a good athlete. So like you can have something to build on. And you're kind of just like, well, he's tall and he can shoot, so maybe he'll be able to figure it out.
We
like
already have a ton of guys who can kind of shoot, and like Furkan kind of shoots, right? Like
right.
in theory, Furkan shoots. Like we don't need the kind of shoot skill set. We have that covered.
Exactly. Yeah, and then other than that, I don't think there's anyone that I would be like super disappointed with. Like most of these guys, like I'd be fine. Like I think that most of them will have like, if they end up becoming NBA players, will have decent careers. And yeah, I mean like everyone I mentioned, like I'd be totally fine with. And like those are the two that like specifically for the Sixers, I just don't want them anywhere near the team. Like even though I know a lot of smart draft people who like them a lot, I'm just like they're not for me.
But I will say, you know, because we did talk about, you know, you mentioned and I had mentioned before the defense when you have Harden and Maxey at the guard spots. Obviously, you know, the hope with Harden on defense is like, well, maybe his hamstring was hurt, maybe that's getting better.
Right.
I think that there's some thought that like, first of all, I think Maxey's generally overrated as defender. Like I think he's very bad and gets talked about as passable. But I also think that there's like some thought, even like whether that's people who like him, people who you know don't like him defensively, which is more me, where it's like, okay, he's small and he tries really hard, so there's not a lot of room to grow. Whereas when I see him, it's like I see a really hard worker who, as of right now, is really not a smart defender, and makes bad plays defensively, does things that like there's room for improvement there, like can make better defensive decisions, can, you know, become a guy who gets his hands on the ball, who, you know, knows better what to do, you know, just all around on defense. Like, I think that I don't think he's ever going to be a good defender, but I think he can be a perfectly fine defender. I do think there's room to grow there. And if there's a guy who's going to find it, I think it's him. So I don't think that negates the fact that you need to like have guys who can defend around him on
Yeah.
this team. But we all love Maxey. I want to leave it on a note where it's like, he can get better there.
Right.
He definitely can get better there.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that's going to hold it back is the physical tools. Like,
Right,
he's just
small.
not, he's small. And like, but like, he still has a really big wingspan. Honestly, I think the ideal role for Maxey on defense is kind of like Derek White, Justin Holiday, like a guy who chases dudes around
Right,
screens.
run around, yeah.
Like he can guard like a Trae Young, Steph Curry, like a guy that is like, I mean, no one can guard Steph Curry, but like in theory, those are the kind of guys that he should be. Like, he can really only guard ones and twos sometimes, depending on who the two is. But like, there's going to be things that holds him back. But like, I actually think he could get to the point where he's a pretty good defender. Like, I think that because of the skill set and like he's athletic enough, and like he's always going to have limitations due to his size. But like, he's 21, like, and like the way that he has improved his offensive game, like, and shown flashes on the defensive end, where like he had one game where he made Trey look legitimately not good. Like, he had like, he still has games occasionally where I'm like, and like his best role in the playoffs was like that, like he was chasing Max Strus around screens. He was chasing, well, Duncan Robinson didn't really play, but like when he did, like he was trying to do that. Like, I think that there's potential there. Like if there's anyone that can get there, it's Maxey, like you said.
Yeah. So, I mean, listen, that was some good draft talk. I learned a lot because I knew nothing and you knew a lot.
Yeah.
So that was great. And yeah, I mean, that's all we have for now. I mean, obviously, go listen to the Ball Pod. I'm sure most people already do, but if you don't, you should subscribe to Porter's Pod and to ours on YouTube.
That's right.
And yeah, I mean, besides, obviously, follow Porter on Twitter at TrillBroDude. I don't have my own one anymore, but I just do Gastro Blues Pod. We have Drew, who's going to edit the pod, DA Pels 13. Steve is Steve J. Lippman. Emily is Third and Girl. And yeah, so anything else you wanna say before we head off?
No, that's it. We are doing a live draft stream on the night of the draft. If you guys are doing a Liberty Bowlers one, I don't want to conflict with that, but we are.
Oh, that's okay. I wouldn't even know. I wouldn't know if we were. we did in the past, but like Dan Olinger really organized that. He's not really around anymore, so we might not.
Gotcha.
I have no idea.
So
Someone's doing something, but I don't know.
Ball on YouTube. Slop, it is so we're gonna have a cast of characters. If you're around and you want to hop on, you're obviously more than welcome. All of you guys
I'll come in. I have no knowledge to share, but I'll come.
Hell yeah, you just come riff. Yeah, exactly. That's what we do. So it's draft night, slopped and screwed. I am the slop guy, so that's my thing. I appreciate you having me on, and yeah, so subscribe to us on YouTube, and we'll be going live on draft night.
All right, awesome. Yeah, everyone should check that out, and be safe and be great. Thanks, Porter.
Peace, bud.